Say 2 or 3 months later, those young men, at least 2 of them, were killed due to gun violence. At that point, we started a new process in the police department. Historically, if there was a crime involving a gun, we solved the crime and simply vouchered the gun. Well, that didn't make any sense to me. So I charged a handful of officers with the support of the ATF, and we started tracing the origin of the guns. And over the course of 5 years, that really developed a picture for us to give us an idea where the guns were purchased, who were purchasing the guns, and where they ultimately ended up. So every gun that we recovered, and the data's behind me, were legally purchased from a federal licensed firearm dealer. However, through straw purchasing, illegal gun ownership, i.e. leaving a gun in your car or unsecured in your house or business, those guns were found in Norfolk and throughout Hampton Roads in some crime one way or another. So what is a straw purchase? A straw purchase simply means Larry Boone, for the sake of illustration, is a convicted felon. I can't purchase a gun. However, my good friend Ken, he's in good standing. He'll go into a gun shop and purchase the gun for me. And once he purchased the gun, he gives me the gun, and I go out and create havoc. And that's what's been happening here in Norfolk and throughout Hampton Roads. Irresponsible gun ownership, what does that look like? I had folks leave guns in plain view in their vehicles, unlocked, and they're stolen. But they seem to think they have a right to leave their car unlocked with their gun in plain view. To me, that's ignorant. But nonetheless, folks do that over and over and over again. This, folks, leads us to the issue being a public health crisis. Since 1989, there's been over 1,000 homicides, 1,109 to be exact. Of that, 952 were African Americans. 143 were white. 9 were Hispanic, and 5 Asians. So what are our strategies to impact the illegal flow of guns? First and foremost, collectively, law enforcement. We have to recognize that we're very good at addressing the end user. And what do I mean by the end user? The person generally with the gun that didn't purchase the gun to start with. We can do better at addressing the flow of where it starts and let it fall where it falls. So shortly you're going to hear from Charlie Patterson, the special agent in charge of the Washington Field Division of the ATF. Also here today is John Butler with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The weight of that office will be partnering with the City of Norfolk regarding Project Safe Neighborhood. Yesterday I had a conversation with the top prosecutor for the Eastern District of Virginia, U.S. Attorney Jessica Aber. I'll be meeting with her next week to also address the issue of illegal guns. The topic is very important to her, as well as her prosecutors. Our very own Commonwealth Attorney, Ramin Fadahi, is here in support of this issue. He and I have already started talking about strategies in which, one, we can address the issues of straw purchasing, two, violent crime itself. He cares very, very deeply about this city. The mayor, Dr. Filer, as well as city council, has embraced a grassroots program in which the community can also have a hand in addressing violent crime in the city of Norfolk. We also have a host of other partners here, clergy, nonprofit, as well as the healthcare profession, that also care about this issue. You've seen them on television, almost every incident. They're in the streets. They're fed up as well. You know, we often highlight the communities that these concerns greatly impact, but we never highlight the various calls from those other communities that are rarely impacted by this. They care too. They care about Norfolk. They're fed up, and they want to know what they can do. I am inspired by the folks that are starting to galvanize around this issue. Lastly, I want to thank the women and men of this department. You have no idea the number of guns that they take off the street almost every night. You want to know what keeps me up at night? I am definitely afraid of an officer-involved shooting. But I want to credit those officers through their professionalism that we hadn't had one. But I know it's coming, and I want to avoid it. So with that, I want to turn it over to Charlie. Charlie, would you come on up?
Thank you, Chief. My name is Charlie Patterson. I'm the Special Agent in charge of the ATF Washington Field Division. I'm here today to pledge our continued support and resources to the Norfolk Police Department and the citizens of Norfolk, as well as the greater Hampton Roads area. The ATF Washington Field Division was designated as a firearms strike force jurisdiction by the Department of Justice to help reduce gun violence under the Comprehensive Violent Crime Reduction Strategy. This means we will be extremely vigilant in disrupting illegal firearms trafficking and stemming the supply of illegally trafficked firearms from source cities such as Norfolk and other surrounding areas in the Virginia Panhandle. We will be steadfast in the pursuit of justice by lending our resources, such as utilizing the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network to ascertain crime gun intelligence, as well as our crime gun intelligence analysts, to locate our trigger pullers and sources of firearm suppliers. We will fulfill this responsibility with the assistance of our ATF special agents who work every day to combat violent crime, gun trafficking, and illegal firearms trafficking. We will also utilize expertise of the ATF industry operations investigators who work tirelessly to perform inspections and regulate the firearms industry. Most importantly, we will continue to call upon our local law enforcement partners to help us carry out our mission. The Norfolk Police Department has always been a crucial partner in our crime-fighting efforts in the Hampton Roads area. We are committed to holding those who actively engage in the business of selling firearms as federal firearms licensees accountable for every firearm transaction made to ensure the public safety is maintained. There are many cases that we investigate that involve illegal firearms trafficking and straw purchasing. Straw purchasers are not just making a false statement on a form. They often provide firearms to criminals who often victimize our communities. We are aware that black and brown communities are critically impacted by gun violence and are committed to doing something about it. An unfortunate recent example of a straw purchasing crime is a former Norfolk State student who, for an entire year, straw purchased 45 firearms, and at least 15 of those firearms he purchased and sold were recovered in crime scenes in Virginia and other states. We will continue to work diligently with the United States Attorney's Office to disrupt cases like this and ensure those that commit illegal firearms-related crimes are prosecuted. We ask that anyone with information about illegal firearms possession call 888-ATF-TIPS. That's 888-ATF-TIPS. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Thank you, Chief Boone and Special Agent Patterson. At this point, we're going to open the floor for question and answer. If I could please have Chief Boone, Special Agent Patterson come to the podium.
All right.
Chief, so you mentioned some pretty alarming numbers. There were just some 952 African Americans with the homicides, only 143 white. What do you attribute that to? And is it in a certain part of maybe a impoverished or marginalized community? Can you talk a little bit more about those numbers?
So it's nothing new. It's the same information I have highlighted for years. The issue surrounding the causes is systemic across the country. You take any urban city where strategic decisions were made years ago, and now we're seeing the impact of those decisions. You've heard me say many times before, it's going to take strategic decisions to undo it. But to have immediate impact, as I said previously, we have to stop the flow of illegal guns. It's hard to change behavior. We can have all kinds of programs. That takes time. Immediately, we have to have policies and processes to stop the flow of illegal guns first. And as I said previously, let it fall where it falls.
Special Agent Patterson, I have a couple questions for you, sir. You
Yeah, sure.
mentioned we've done extensive reporting with Norfolk Police on this issue before. We want to ask you, first of all, you mentioned a specific case. I believe you said it was a former Norfolk State student. Could you dive more into that specific case and just the ramifications of straw purchasing in our area and cause?
Well, I'll just talk a little bit about what's been released thus far on that particular investigation, and I think that the chief said it perfectly. Here we have a student who was able to purchase firearms, took advantage of that opportunity to sell those firearms, and then they were ending up in crime scenes. And so I think that it gets lost in on some individuals, whether we're talking about the Norfolk State student or someone else, when it pertains to firearms trafficking. To us, it's all firearms trafficking, whether we're talking straw purchasing or not, or it's firearms trafficking. And these firearms last the entire lifespan of the particular firearm, right? And so we know through utilization of the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, we call it NIBIN. I'm sure that you are familiar with NIBIN. We find often that firearms are used in multiple crime scenes, right? And so the impact not only is felt here in Norfolk, but all over the Hampton Roads area. And so with respect to straw purchasing, in this particular case, firearms were located all over the place in some other states as well as in this area. And so, that's the mission and the thing that we want to bring home today is to have the community members to understand that this is extremely impactful. And unfortunately, it's impactful to those communities that are black and brown, as dictated by the stats that the chief brought forth today. So that's really the message that we want to bring home on this.
And I know that Chief Boone had mentioned a lot of stats and information as far as our local area here, but as the special agent with the Washington Field Office, among all the other areas and departments that you cover within your office, where does Norfolk, where does Hampton Roads rank in terms of straw purchasing happening as opposed to other office or other areas within the Washington Field Office?
Well, we'll just, with respect to, we don't want to get the straw purchasing piece because straw purchasing can be difficult at times to figure out, right? But what I will say in terms of firearm recoveries that are made throughout the state of Virginia, the Hampton Roads area ranks extremely high, this whole area, for sure. with respect to firearm recoveries throughout the state of Virginia.
Chief Boone, well, how is the new Virginia law for reporting lost and stolen weapons, how has that helped with trying to minimize the flow of getting guns in the wrong hands? How has that helped you guys over the last year?
Well, you know, before the new law went into effect, one could purchase as many guns as they could afford every day. No questions asked for the most part. And if those guns were lost or stolen, we recovered them. We went to the owner or the person that purchased the weapon. And to give you an example, we say, John, did you know your gun was used in a crime? And did you know it was missing? You could simply say, no, I didn't, you know, and that'd be the end of it. So last year we had, I think 39 guns reported lost and stolen that we recovered. This year, because of the new law, we've had 575 reported lost or stolen. So, you know, I said earlier, the only way you change behavior is through policy. Programs are good, but if there's nothing on paper, a policy to affect behavior, we'll continue to do this, which is why I am so thankful that Charlie Patterson and his staff is here, because we're going to start focusing on the flow of guns. We're never going to change this narrative by doing the things we've been doing. We can march, we can pray, and I don't want to offend anyone, but that's the reality of it. The only way we're going to change behavior if we start focusing on those few people and businesses that engage in said behavior.
And what type of policies would help you guys, not just you, the police department, but ATF? What types of other policies would help as well?
Well, the policies aren't necessarily an issue with respect to what we're talking about. It's collectively having the will, okay? This is very political. Folks seem to think that you're encroaching upon their Second Amendment privilege, and I respect that. You know, I didn't get here without understanding what the Second Amendment is, and I've taken the oath at least 9 times to get here and given it at least 100. So, as I said previously, it's going to take the will of the law enforcement community, local, state, and federal, to start saying, these guns were purchased here, these are the numbers of straw purchasing that came from this location, we're going to start holding you accountable. And we hadn't done a very good job of that.
Chief, as the community, how can we assist Norfolk Police Department with getting a handle on the guns? It's only so much you guys can do, but you got parents that know their kids have guns in the house. How can we deal with that? How can the community come and help Norfolk Police Department?
Well, that's a good question, Rhoda. I'll give you an example of what that looks like, okay? So about 3 weeks ago, I got a text message from a young lady that lived in public housing. She said, Chief, I think they're about to start shooting out here. She texted me about a minute later. She said, Chief, you need to get somebody out here now. Within minutes, she called me back, and you can hear the fear in her voice, and I heard her children screaming out of fear as well. They were on the ground. Because she called me, I was able to call a field commander and have them direct officers right away. And they got there doing the shooting, okay? And the officer challenged these young men. They didn't care. They continued to shoot. What would have happened if that officer, that sergeant, I should say, didn't have that self-control? People would have been upset. They would have been upset. But he had self-control. We managed to arrest 2 of these 6 individuals, and we recovered 8 handguns and rifles. So the question is, what can the community do? Be bold and speak up. And that's what that young lady did.
Chief,
Chief,
for communities watching at home,
Are there any businesses who are disproportionately selling to these straw purchasers, and what are you doing about it? So,
I made that information available every year. I don't want to say it for public consumption, but that information is available, is in print, and you're welcome to it if you don't have it.
Chief, where do we
Chief,
found, where do we fall at in the 757 with 7 cities? Where do we fall at with the most homicides? Where are we on the scale?
Another good question, Rhoda. I don't compare us to the 757. No city looks like us with respect to demographics, poverty level, and population. I compare us to Richmond. So we had 61 homicides this year. Richmond had maybe 100, give or take. We had 1/3 of our homicides, what a lot of people don't realize, happening inside the home. What can we do about that? We got young men inside an apartment or a house, they have a disagreement and over some of the darnest thing, a playoff game, and they shoot each other. There's nothing we can do about that at that moment. 1/3 of our homicides happened that way. We call them residential homicides. Last year was the same way. And I think if you would look in urban cities, nationally, you'll see the same thing. Very good question.
Chief, question, what do y'all know?
okay, so for communities within Norfolk watching at home tonight saying, hey, are these illegal guns being covered in my community, on my streets? Are there some hot spots, like some top 3 locations around the city of Norfolk where you're finding the majority of them, or is it completely scattered?
So the hot spots have been the same hot spots for decades, okay? And those hot spots have the same commonalities: underemployment, undereducation, health issues, conflict resolution issues, lack of opportunity. It's the same thing I've said for years. It's the same thing in any urban city that have seen decades of neglect. And I don't fault city council for that. They're trying their darndest to correct that. But I do fault those in charge some 60-plus years ago.
So are you referring to public housing and things of that
No,
nature?
it's not just public housing. There's any community that fall under that umbrella that I just highlighted.
Chief, question about, what do y'all know about the cause of the start of the flow, where it's beginning, stolen weapons? Is it gang related? Is it kids seeing a gun out somewhere and just taking it for themselves? What can you tell us about what's starting?
I can tell you what I know personally, okay? Holistically, I don't know. But here in Norfolk, we see young ladies and those that are in good standing buying guns, for the most part, gang members. And those gang members pay double the cost, and you see the impact they have in our city and throughout Hampton Roads.
Chief, I have noticed, I looked at the data that was sent to us from 2017 to 2020 relating to gangs. I think in 2017, you guys took about 24 guns from people in gangs to 2020 was 119. So obviously that is steadily increasing, but I know we were just here for Operation Triple Beam. So are you doing more things like that to kind of keep that side at bay?
Oh, we're going to be doing more of a lot of things other than operations, okay? I really feel that collectively we've had enough, okay? You know, I'm a former football player, but I want to use a sports analogy. You're going to see a full court press regarding this issue.
Chief, one last question from me. A lot of people want to blame gun violence on low-income community, poverty. But how can it be poverty is when we're accustomed to that lifestyle? What is the real issue why there is black on black crime, so much black on black crime?
Well, people say that, but violence is, for the most part, interracial, intraracial, meaning black tend to kill blacks, okay? White tend to kill whites. But in those communities where there's a lack of resources and lack of hope, it becomes common for some, I want to underscore for some. You know, you have a person that may have grown up in a certain neighborhood and they go to bed at night to the sound of gunfire. They wake up in the morning, I'm talking about young folks, and go to school right through the path of those gunfires that they heard the night before. And over time, you become immune to it. I've often said this, and I believe with everything in me, the me I see is the me I'll be. So young folks, they're seeing this stuff, okay? There's a reason why, you know, we have not learned in some communities conflict resolution, because conflict is natural. You know, I was at the supermarket the other night, and I saw a young man, African-American man, with his, I don't know if it was his son or nephew or what, but it was a young man, 6 or 7 years of age, and this was a grown man. He gets out the car, and he yells at this young man to the point that I'm jumping, you know, and he calls him the word. Shut the effing door. Calls him the word. Doesn't say whatever his name is, shut the door. So, you know, that's unfortunate, but that's the reality of it. So again, black tend to kill black, white kill white. It's just more highlighted in urban settings, particularly where there's poverty.
One more, this last question, Zach.
Chief, you mentioned to us before that in other stories that the focus shouldn't be so much on the end user, but it also needs to be focused on the folks supplying the guns, selling the guns. In this new year, what is your message to gun shops, places that are selling guns regarding this, and how is your department specifically going to be working with gun shops and places selling guns to make sure that this type of activity is curbed?
Well, first of all, I'm going to go back to what I said previously. We're going to let it fall where it falls. I can tell you I have some suspicion of certain gun shops. But there's an opportunity for us to work together in addressing straw purchasing. And I'm open to that. I'm open to anything that will curtail gun violence in Norfolk, Hampton Roads. So that's an invitation to who's ever listening.
Thank you, Chief. I want to thank everyone for coming today. If anyone has any follow-up questions or would like some more materials, please reach out to the Norfolk Police Department Public Information Office. You can email us at npdpio@norfolk.gov. Thank you all for coming.